Commander Vex-Nine stood in the communications bay of the Galactic Defense Station Omega-7, though staring at the holographic display with what could only be described as mounting dread. His 6 tentacles twitched nervously as he processed the incoming data streams from the Outer Rim territories. "Sir." Lieutenant Cree 4 approached cautiously, her blue-scaled hide shimmering under the station's artificial lighting. "The situation reports from Sector 12 are, well, they're not good." Vex-Nine's primary eye rotated toward her while his secondary ones remained fixed on the tactical display. "Define not good, Lieutenant. Are we talking about the usual Zerkan raiding parties, or something that requires me to actually pay attention?" "The Zerkans have overrun 14 colonies in the past rotation cycle," Cree 4 replied, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They're using some kind of new bioweapon that dissolves our standard defensive barriers, like they're made of sugar crystals." "Ah." Vex-Nine's tentacles curled inward, a gesture equivalent to a human rubbing their temples. "So it's the requires actual attention variety. Wonderful. Just absolutely wonderful." The holographic display flickered as new data streams poured in from the embattled colonies. Red indicators spread across the star map like some kind of galactic infection, each one representing thousands of civilians fleeing their homes or worse, unable to flee at all. "Sir." "There's more," Cree 4 continued, her scales now shifting to a distinctly unhealthy shade of purple. "The Zerkan fleet composition suggests they're not just raiding anymore. Intelligence believes they're preparing for a full-scale invasion of the core worlds." Vex-Nine's laugh was a sound like grinding metal mixed with escaping gas. "It's of course they are. Because why would the universe make anything simple? How many ships are we talking about?" "Preliminary scans indicate approximately 3,000 vessels, ranging from fighter craft to their new Dreadnought-class battleships." 3,000. Vex-Nine repeated the number slowly, savoring each syllable like it was poison. "And how many ships do we currently have available for immediate deployment?" Cree 4's silence spoke volumes. "Lieutenant, I asked you a question." 47, sir. 47 fully operational vessels within strike range of the affected sectors." The silence that followed was so complete that the station's environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. Vex-Nine's primary eye focused entirely on his subordinate, while his tentacles began a slow, rhythmic tapping against the deck plating. 47 ships against 3,000 Zerkan vessels," he said finally. "Well, that's just perfect. Absolutely perfect. I suppose next you're going to tell me that reinforcements from the inner systems are weeks away?" "Actually, sir, the 5th Fleet is currently engaged in peacekeeping operations in the Andorian cluster, and the 7th Fleet is undergoing maintenance rotations at Starbase Prime. The earliest we could expect significant reinforcements would be approximately 37 standard days." Vex-Nine's secondary eyes finally turned away from the tactical display to join his primary eye in staring at Cree 4. The effect was somewhat unsettling, like being examined by a very disappointed, very tentacled microscope. 37 days, he repeated. "The Zerkans will have turned half the Outer Rim into radioactive slag by then." "What about mercenary contractors? Surely there are some desperate fools willing to throw their lives away for adequate compensation. Most of the reliable mercenary companies are already under contract with various trade guilds, sir." "The ones that are available." Cree 4 paused, consulting her datapad. "Well, let's just say their success rates don't inspire confidence. How bad are we talking?" "The Crimson Void Company has a 37% mission failure rate, and that's not counting the times they've accidentally shot their own clients." "Accidentally?" "That's what they claim, sir." Vex-Nine's tentacles stopped their rhythmic tapping and began what could only be described as aggressive writhing. "So our options are limited to incompetent mercenaries, a handful of our own ships, and the desperate hope that the Zerkans will somehow defeat themselves through sheer stupidity." "There is one other possibility, sir." Something in Cree 4's tone made Vex-Nine's primary eye narrow. "I'm listening, and I'm already regretting it." "The Terran Republic has recently applied for membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition." Their application is still under review, but they've offered to provide military assistance as a demonstration of their commitment to galactic peace. Terrans. Vex-Nine's voice carried the same tone most beings reserve for discussing particularly virulent diseases. You mean those creatures from that nightmarish death world they call Earth? The very same, sir. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're suggesting that we request military assistance from a species that evolved on a planet where the weather tries to kill you. The wildlife considers you a light snack, and the very air contains enough oxygen to make most civilized beings violently ill. They do have a rather impressive military record, sir. Intelligence reports indicate they've never lost a war. That's because they're too insane to recognize when they should surrender. Vex-Nine's tentacles were now moving in patterns that would have been considered obscene in several star systems. Have you read their historical records? They fight wars for sport. They invented weapons capable of destroying their entire planet just to see if they could. With respect, sir, that same willingness to embrace extreme solutions might be exactly what we need against the Zerkans. Vex-Nine stared at her for a long moment, his tentacles slowly stilling. You're serious about this? Tronkin, sir, 47 ships against 3,000 is not a battle. It's a massacre. We need something the Zerkans won't expect, something that will disrupt their invasion timeline long enough for proper reinforcements to arrive. And you think a bunch of Deathworlders fit that description? I think the Zerkans have been fighting civilized opponents for centuries, sir. They know how we think, how we fight, how we retreat. They've never encountered anything like humans. Mick. The tactical display flickered again, updating with new casualty reports from the outer colonies. The red indicators were spreading faster now, each one representing another system falling to the Zerkan advance. How many ships could the Terrans deploy? Vex-Nine asked finally. According to their preliminary response, they could have a full battle group in the affected sector within 72 hours. A battle group? How many ships is that exactly? Cree 4 consulted her datapad again. The message wasn't entirely clear on specific numbers, sir. It just said they would send enough to get the job done. Oh, that's reassuring. The Deathworlders will send enough ships. I'm sure that's a very precise military term in their savage vocabulary. Sir, we're running out of options. The Zerkan advance shows no signs of slowing, and every hour we delay is another colony that gets overrun. Vex-Nine's gaze returned to the tactical display, watching as another red indicator appeared on the outer edge of civilized space. Somewhere out there, beings not unlike himself were fighting and dying while he stood in the relative safety of a command center, debating whether to trust humanity's offer of help. What do we know about their military capabilities? Beyond the obvious fact that they're completely unhinged. Intelligence has been sparse, sir. The Terrans haven't been very forthcoming with detailed information about their military assets. What we do know suggests they favor kinetic weapons and what they call overwhelming firepower. Kinetic weapons? You mean they literally throw rocks at their enemies? Very fast, very heavy rocks, sir. With explosive payloads, of course they do. Because why would a species from a death world develop elegant, civilized weapons when they could just throw bigger rocks? Vex-Nine's primary eye rotated back toward the communications console. What's their response time if we send the request now? They indicated they could begin deployment within 6 hours of receiving confirmation, sir. 6 hours. The Zerkans would need at least 12 hours to reach the next major population center, assuming they maintained their current advance rate. It would be cutting things extremely close, but it might work. Sir? Cree 4's voice interrupted his calculations. There's something else about the Terran offer. Of course there is. What fresh nightmare are you about to share with me? They've requested operational command of the defense effort. The silence that followed was even more complete than before. Even the station's environmental systems seemed to pause in anticipation of Vex-Nine's response. They want operational command, he said slowly. Yes, sir. Complete tactical authority over all defensive operations in the affected sectors. Let me see if I have this right. The Deathworlders want us to not only accept their help, but to actually put them in charge of the entire defense. That appears to be the case, sir. Vex-Nine's tentacles began what could only be described as interpretive dance, expressing emotions for which most languages lacked adequate vocabulary. They want us to hand over command of 47 of the Coalition's finest vessels to a species that thinks warfare is a recreational activity, he continued. A species that considers planet-destroying weapons to be appropriate responses to minor disagreements. To be fair, sir, our current strategy of hide behind defensive barriers and hope for the best hasn't been particularly effective against the Zerkan advance. That's not a strategy, Lieutenant. That's just what happens when you're hopelessly outnumbered by homicidal maniacs with superior technology. The tactical display updated again, showing the Zerkan fleet's continued advance toward the core worlds. At their current rate of progress, they would reach the heavily populated Centauri system within the next rotation cycle. Sir, I hate to press the issue, but we need to make a decision soon. The longer we wait, the fewer options we'll have. Vex-Nine stared at the display for another long moment, his tentacles slowly settling into what might have been resignation or possibly just exhaustion. Open a channel to the Terran Republic, he said finally. Inform them that the Galactic Defense Coalition accepts their offer of military assistance. And the operational command issue, sir. Tell them. Vex-Nine paused, his primary eye closing briefly. Tell them that desperate times call for desperate measures. They'll have tactical authority over the defense effort. Yes, sir. Shall I inform the other coalition commanders of our decision? Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to learn that we've just handed control of our military assets to a bunch of Deathworlders. I can hardly wait for those conversations. Cree 4 began composing the message, her claws tapping rapidly across the communication console's interface. Sir, what should I tell the Terrans regarding our current force disposition and enemy capabilities? Tell them everything. Ship counts, weapon specifications, Zerkan tactical patterns, everything we know about their bioweapons. If we're going to trust them with this, they might as well have all the information, even the classified intelligence reports, especially those. If the humans are going to save us from this mess, they'll need to know exactly what kind of mess we're dealing with. The communication went out across the vast distances between worlds, carrying humanity's first official invitation to participate in galactic warfare. Vex-Nine watched the transmission indicator change from sending to delivered and wondered if he'd just made the best decision of his career or signed everyone's death warrant. How long until we receive their response? He asked. Given the communication delay to the Sol system, approximately 47 minutes, sir. 47 minutes to find out whether the humans will actually help us, or if they'll just laugh at our desperate situation and go back to whatever it is Deathworlders do for entertainment. Sir, if I may ask, what do you think they do for entertainment? Vex-Nine's tentacles twitched in what might have been amusement or horror. Lieutenant, based on everything I've read about their species, I'm fairly certain I don't want to know. The waiting began. 43 minutes later, the response arrived. Sir. Cree 4's voice cracked with excitement as she stared at her console. The Terrans have responded. Vex-Nine's primary eye snapped toward her, while his tentacles performed what could only be described as anxious knots. Well? Are they coming to save us, or are they politely declining to participate in our inevitable doom? They're coming, sir. But Cree 4's scales shifted to that concerning purple shade again. Their message is unusual. Define unusual. Are we talking about mildly eccentric or full Deathworlder insanity? They said. And I quote, "Hold our beer. We're bringing the party to you." The silence stretched so long that several junior officers stopped their work to stare at the communication station. They want us to hold their beer, Vex-Nine repeated slowly, a fermented beverage. While they attend a party. That appears to be the gist of it, sir. Oh, and they also included deployment details. Their battle group will arrive in 68 hours. Battle group size? Still vague on specifics, sir. The manifest just lists Task Force Overkill with an estimated crew complement of 12,000 personnel. Vex-Nine's tentacles stopped their anxious writhing and hung perfectly still. 12,000 crew members? That's more personnel than we have on this entire station. How many ships are they bringing? The manifest doesn't specify individual vessel counts, sir. It just says the task force includes sufficient firepower to ruin someone's entire day. These humans have a very casual relationship with military terminology, don't they? Before Cree 4 could respond, the tactical display erupted with new alerts. The Zerkan advance had accelerated, their fleet pushing deeper into Coalition space with renewed aggression. Sir. Operations Officer Tan-7's voice echoed across the command center. The Zerkans have engaged our outer defense perimeter at grid reference Alpha 97. Initial reports indicate they're deploying their new bioweapons in concentrated bursts. Casualties? Vex-9 asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Heavy, sir. The defense platforms are dissolving on contact with the bioweapon payload. Estimated time until complete perimeter breach is 4 hours and 37 minutes. Vex-9's gaze shifted between the tactical display and the communications console. 4 hours until the Zerkans broke through their last major defensive line. 68 hours until the humans arrived. The mathematics were depressingly simple. Lieutenant Cree 4, send another message to the Terrans. Inform them that the situation has deteriorated and ask if there's any possibility of accelerating their deployment schedule. Yes, sir. While Cree 4 composed the urgent message, Vex-9 watched the red indicators on the tactical display multiply like some kind of cosmic infection. Each new alert represented another coalition ship destroyed, another defensive position overrun, another step closer to complete disaster. 23 minutes later, the human response arrived. Sir, the Terrans have replied, Cree 4 announced. They say they've moved up their timeline. New estimated arrival is 14 hours. 14 hours? Vex-9's tentacles performed what might have been a victory dance, if tentacles could dance and if the situation warranted celebration. How did they cut 54 hours off their deployment time? Their exact words were, "We're taking the express route. Tell your people to clear the hyperspace lanes around Grid 77 Bravo. Things are about to get interesting. Clear the hyperspace lanes." What exactly are they planning to do? I don't know, sir. But they've also transmitted navigation data for something called a tactical insertion burn. The energy readings they're projecting are, well, they're unprecedented. The next 14 hours passed with agonizing slowness. The Zerkan fleet continued its relentless advance, smashing through coalition defenses like they were made of decorative paper. By the time the human arrival window opened, the enemy had overrun 6 more systems and was bearing down on the heavily populated Vega colony. Sir, I'm detecting massive hyperspace distortions at Grid 77 Bravo, Tan-7 reported. Energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Finally, Vex-9 muttered. Let's see what these Deathworlders consider adequate reinforcements. The hyperspace distortions intensified, creating ripples in local space-time that made the station's artificial gravity fluctuate. Emergency lighting flickered as the power grid struggled to compensate for the exotic energy fields washing over their position. Then reality tore open. The first ship that emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything in the Coalition's military databases. It was massive, angular, and covered in what appeared to be weapons systems, lots of weapons systems. Then another ship appeared. Then another, then several more. Sir, Tan-7's voice was barely above a whisper. Sensor readings indicate 47 vessels in the human task force. 47? The same number as our entire defensive fleet? Yes, sir. But Tan-7 paused, checking his readings again. Sir, these ships are huge. The largest vessel in their formation is registering as nearly 6 kilometers in length. 6 kilometers. Vex-9's primary eye rotated to focus entirely on the tactical display. What kind of civilization builds 6-kilometer warships? The kind that evolves on Deathworlds, apparently. The human fleet arranged itself in what could only be described as an aggressive formation, their ships spreading out across the contested space like predators surrounding prey. Almost immediately, Coalition communication channels began crackling with incoming transmissions. Attention Coalition forces. This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Navy, commanding Task Force Overkill. We are assuming tactical control of defensive operations as previously agreed. All Coalition vessels are to maintain current positions and await further orders. Vex-Nine activated his command channel. Admiral Mitchell, this is Commander Vex-Nine of Defense Station Omega-7. We're relieved to have you here. But I should warn you that the Zerkan fleet significantly outnumbers your task force. Commander Vex-Nine, thanks for the heads up. We've reviewed your tactical data and enemy force disposition. We're aware of the numerical disparity, and you're still planning to engage them directly? There was a pause before Admiral Mitchell responded, and Vex-Nine could swear he heard laughter in the background. Commander, let me ask you something. In all your experience with the Zerkans, have they ever fought an opponent that shoots back with antimatter warheads? Antimatter? Vex-Nine's tentacles went rigid. You brought antimatter weapons into Coalition space, among other things. Meph. We also brought kinetic bombardment platforms, plasma lance batteries, and something we call planet crackers, though we probably won't need those for this operation. Planet crackers? Weapons designed to break apart small moons and asteroids. Very useful for mining operations, but they work surprisingly well against large fleets too. Before Vex-Nine could formulate a response to that terrifying statement, the tactical display erupted with new contacts. The Zerkan fleet had detected the human arrival and was moving to intercept, their formation shifting from invasion deployment to battle configuration. Sir, Tan-7 called out. The Zerkan fleet is adjusting course to engage the human task force. They're deploying their bioweapons in preparation for long-range bombardment. Admiral Mitchell, Vex-Nine transmitted urgently. The Zerkans are preparing to use their bioweapons against your ships. These weapons dissolve our defensive barriers on contact. I strongly recommend evasive maneuvers. Thanks for the warning, Commander. We'll take that under advisement. The human fleet's response was immediate and completely insane. Instead of adopting defensive formations or attempting evasive maneuvers, they accelerated directly toward the Zerkan position. Not only were they charging straight into the teeth of the enemy fleet, they were doing it at velocities that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. How fast are they going? Vex-Nine demanded. 0.73 light speed and accelerating, Tan-7 replied, his voice filled with disbelief. Sir, at those velocities, any collision would release enough energy to sterilize entire star systems. They're not planning to ram the Zerkan fleet, are they? Sir, I honestly have no idea what they're planning. The Zerkan fleet responded to the human charge by unleashing their bioweapons in massive coordinated volleys. Streams of corrosive energy lanced across the void, each one capable of dissolving a Coalition cruiser in seconds. The bioweapons struck the leading human vessels and simply bounced off. What? Vex-Nine stared at the tactical display in complete bewilderment. The bioweapons had no effect? Apparently not, sir. The human ships appear to be protected by some kind of energy shielding we've never encountered before. Admiral Mitchell's voice crackled over the communication channel again. All Coalition forces, you might want to step back and give us some room to work. Things are about to get loud. The human fleet reached weapons range and opened fire. The universe exploded. Streams of antimatter annihilated everything they touched, converting matter directly into pure energy. Kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through Zerkan vessels like they were made of tissue paper. Plasma beams hot enough to ignite small stars carved through enemy formations, leaving trails of superheated gas in their wake. The Zerkan fleet, which had seemed so unstoppable just moments before, began disintegrating under the human assault. Ships that had weathered Coalition attacks for hours were vaporized in seconds. Their mighty dreadnoughts, armed with weapons capable of cracking planets, were torn apart by forces they had never imagined possible. Sir, Tan-7's voice was filled with awe. The human fleet is cutting through the Zerkan formation like it's not even there. I'm reading total destruction of enemy vessels across all engagement zones. How many Zerkan ships have been destroyed? 237 confirmed kills in the first engagement wave, sir. The humans have suffered 0 casualties. 0 casualties. The Zerkans, who had been terrorizing the galaxy for decades, had managed to inflict exactly 0 damage on the human fleet. Admiral Mitchell, Vex-Nine transmitted, your weapon's effectiveness is impressive. How are you achieving such devastating results? Well, Commander, it turns out that when you evolve on a world that's constantly trying to kill you, you develop a very practical approach to problem solving. If something threatens you, you hit it with enough firepower to make sure it stops being a threat, and if that doesn't work, then you hit it harder. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for another hour. The human fleet methodically dismantled the Zerkan invasion force with the casual efficiency of exterminators dealing with particularly troublesome insects. Every time the Zerkans attempted a new tactical approach, the humans countered with weapons so devastating that the very concepts behind them were difficult to comprehend. When it was over, 3,000 Zerkan vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of radioactive debris. The human fleet remained completely intact, their ships barely showing signs of having been in combat at all. Coalition forces. Admiral Mitchell's voice carried a note of satisfaction. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We're conducting sweep operations to ensure no Zerkan vessels escaped. Overall casualty count: 0 friendly losses, 100% enemy fleet destruction. Vex-Nine slumped in his command chair, his tentacles hanging limply at his sides. Admiral, on behalf of the Galactic Defense Coalition, I want to thank you for your assistance. Your intervention saved countless lives. Happy to help, Commander. Though I have to say, your intelligence reports were pretty accurate. The Zerkans really weren't prepared for modern warfare. Modern warfare? Sure. Antimatter weapons, kinetic bombardment, plasma projection systems, basic military technology, really. Nothing too exotic. Yeah, basic. Well, we didn't bring any of the really dangerous stuff. No gravity weapons, no reality distortion fields, no temporal displacement systems. It's just standard combat equipment. The silence that followed was so complete that even the station's environmental systems seemed afraid to make noise. Admiral, Vex-Nine said finally, would the Terran Republic be interested in discussing a mutual defense treaty? I think that could be arranged, Commander. After all, the galaxy's a dangerous place. It's good to have friends who know how to handle problems. As the human fleet began organizing salvage operations and securing the battlefield, Vex-Nine turned to Lieutenant Cree 4. Make a note in the official record, he said. When requesting military assistance from Deathworlders, be very specific about the level of force required. Apparently, their definition of adequate reinforcements differs significantly from ours. Yes, sir. Anything else? Yes. Send a message to Coalition High Command. Inform them that the Terran Republic's membership application should be fast-tracked. Boar and Lieutenant? Gand, sir, make sure the cafeteria starts stocking human beverages. Something tells me we're going to be holding a lot more of their beer. Outside the station's viewports, the human fleet continued its methodical cleanup operations, their massive vessels moving through the debris field with the confidence of apex predators in their natural habitat. The galaxy had just learned a valuable lesson about the inhabitants of Sol 3. When Deathworlders offer to help, they don't mess around.